Bible study meeting. We had two 15-year-old high school kids come and talk to us, both girls. And after the speech, after they finished, we asked them, so how's it going in high school? And they said, not very well. And we said, why? And they said the words that still haunt me today. They said, because nobody says no. That's a quote from those two kids. And what that meant was, none of their parents were prepared to go through the conflict of saying no. Now, have you ever said no, by the way, to a teenager? Yes. Have you ever had that experience? Yes. So the way that you build your rapport with that teenager at 15 is what I did with my daughter 3 weeks ago in California. Because I have a grandson, Gabriel, who's 19 months old. And my daughter loves him, something fierce, and so do I. He's a great kid, has a blast, runs around, smiling, laughing, most of the time. He's starting to go through that point where he always wants what he wants. He believes that the world is built around him. And my daughter has a bit of a hard time with him breaking into tears. So at one point 3 weeks ago, she asked him to do something where there was a little bit of a conflict, and he just collapsed. I mean, you'd have thought somebody was going after him with a pitchfork. And it was time for a timeout. So I grabbed him, went in the other room, and closed the door. Now, he's still doing his thing. I mean, you'd have thought maybe somebody was crushing him with a great big boulder. I mean, he's screaming, he's crying, it's terrible. After about 5 minutes, my daughter came and retrieved him. But the following day was a whole different day. Because he figures out real fast that if he does these things and he doesn't get attention, and the attention he does get is negative, he goes in the other room with his dreaded grandfather, he ain't going to do that anymore. So the next day he didn't. And the point I'm making is, that's the way you teach a 15-year-old to listen to you when you say no. That's the way you teach boundaries. By teaching the 19-month-old that he can't do everything he wants to do when he wants to do it. And that's the way that you teach love. Because the following day, my daughter said to me, how did you feel when you were in there and you were holding him and he was screaming his head off? Because she really finds that difficult. I said, I felt fine. Hardly in the least. And she said, why? And I said, because I was loving him. And I know that. I absolutely know that that is the way to love a child. And that is the way to teach that child the boundaries so he's comfortable living in those boundaries, comfortable building his own self-esteem, and comfortable that he knows someone cares enough for him to say, no, you cannot do that. And if you do, it's timeout time. And that, by the way, continues to happen. That's not just a single instance. So, what happens as an adult? Yesterday I walked into one of my accountant's offices. A guy I know, a nice guy, kind of a personal meeting. But he, once in a while, recommends something that's good for investing. So I walked in there yesterday and I said, what's good? And he said, nothing. He said, right now, I can't recommend, without a little risk, anything. And I kind of shook my head, sort of accepted that, and we talked for a little while, and we actually talked about this discipline issue, this boundaries issue, and we talked about the fact that, you know, most of the people that come into his office when he says, there's nothing out there, say, I don't believe that. There has to be something that will return me 10% or 20% or 100%, because that's the way the world is. And then he asks them a second question. He asks them, do you have a savings account? And 88% of the people that he asks that come through the door do not have a savings account. And that's the same boundary issues we're talking to Gabriel about when we put him in the other room. Because the people that don't have a savings account get their money, and what do with it? They buy right now. There's no internal boundaries. And the point I'm making is, they're not loving themselves. Because when they have a tough time, or life gets a little difficult, or a paycheck stops coming in, or some kind of health issue comes along, it's a disaster for them. They're extended on their credit cards. They're buying new cars on 60 months, 2% or whatever the interest rate is, but there's no boundaries. Now, why does that happen? Partially it's happened because 70% of our households have both parents working. Partially it's happened because our minimum wage is $7.50 an hour, whatever it is, and you can't raise a kid on the eventual result of that. So that parents are not home with their children. But partially it's happened even if you have two parents that are working, because parents don't go through the pain of setting boundaries. And what am I asking you to do about that? I ask myself about this question too. So one of the boundaries I have to set for myself is not to eat chocolate. Now that sounds silly, but it's one small change I can make in my life that's a boundary issue. And those small changes lead to bigger changes. So there's a trail all the way through this. From the age of 0, the age of 2, the age of 15, or when you walk into your accountant's office and you're $30,000 into your credit card and you don't have a savings account. So you love yourself by building your own boundaries, learning how to love yourself, and by doing that, loving others. Thank you very much.